This nibble originally aired on RSBANDB Update, episode 883, Extreme Shakes. Enjoy. Herblore, Herblore, Herblore. We talked about the protein shakes, of course, but extreme combat potions, in terms of the attack, strength, defense, magic, and ranged extreme potions, are now tradable, and there's a new GE set that includes all the ingredients for an overload potion. Yes, no, maybe
great.
so?
Well, you always could buy these. It's just that this was a aftermarket type deal, right? Like you could buy the sets. You could always buy these kinds of sets.
But they weren't tradable.
Well, yeah, I guess that. Well,
unless you mean you buy like the gear to make it and such, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really think that this is just a quality of life update.
It is.
It's been a long time. And there could be maybe there's a place for skillers to get a little bit. And PVMers may not have to spend so much time not PVMing. So I don't see any problems with this whatsoever.
Yeah. So I spent about 45 minutes to an hour or so thinking about this, going back and forth on whether or not this was a good thing. Because you go back to when the extreme potions and overloads came out, those were initially promised and brought into game as a unique unlock, a unique reward, if you will, for achieving high level at the time in the Herblore skill, with the cherry on top being the overload at 96. And the idea behind this was that you, of course, would then alternatively be locked into things like supersets and such if you didn't have those. And the motivation to train to high level Herblore, which was expensive at the time, would have been to unlock these extreme potions and eventually overload. But as we all know, the skill went to 120. What was once high in the skill at 96 is now decidedly mid-level, considering the fact it goes to 120. If you're looking at it from that 120 perspective, and from that it makes sense, because at that point in time, you have to look at the grand chart of overloads and just how those all factor in to each other, and just the myriad of potions, the constituency potions that go into making an actual overload potion. And it's quite absurd looking at this entire chart. So just from that chart, and looking at the fact that, hey, this is, something that probably should have been done with 120, it's something I can get behind. But I've actually talked to people who feel that this is against what was initially the design of the Herblore skill around these overload potions and such back in the day.
I agree with that. It is against the original design. That's a fact. But it sometimes you could change 12-year-old designs, and that's okay.
Yeah.
No one's gonna get hurt.
And see,
it's gonna be all right.
Right. And so keep in mind, to get to that initial overload, you need the super attack potion, the strength, defense, magic, and ranged. You need the super of all those. And then with that, you're also talking about irits, catentines, quorums, dwarfweeds, lantatimes, eye of newts, white berries, limpwort roots, wine is amarak? Yeah, wine is amarak, and the potato cactus. And with that, then you get your super potions, and then you add on Evanto, Lantatime, Dwarfweeds, those spiky things, and ground mud runes. And then you have your extreme potions, and then we can start talking Grandwall spikes, and then we can start talking about overloads at that point. And then when you sum all that up together, you see how much stuff goes into making just a single overload. Now you flip to the other side of it, and you start talking about elder overloads. You have all the other adrenaline potions, the prayer renewal potions, the super anti-fires, yada, 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 down the list. You start to just see how darn complicated it is to get a supreme overload or an elder overload at the end of it. And that's why I think today, in 2022, this is probably a good change. But at the same side of it, we have to ask, at what point do we stop asking people to necessarily unlock things for the skill? And
I think the fact that every single potion that you would even consider using in an in-game situation from a stat boosting perspective is locked still.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you still need 90 Herblore to make the overloads, and that's with a +6 stat boost from Spicy Stews. So to produce overloads on a mass scale, which are a prerequisite to any high-level PVM or even doing mid-tier PVM with any degree of effectiveness, you definitely want at least base overloads, if not elder overloads. So all of the best rewards are still locked behind the skill,
and
including elder overloads,
and even more than just the skill. You have to start talking about quests to get the combination unlocks.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
So while there was that initial design to lock the extreme sets and the overloads behind the high level of Herblore, we now have the next generation of that, RR, unlocked based on quests and high levels. So I don't really... And I wanted to try and find somebody who was available to articulate this point on the podcast. I wanted to find somebody who would articulate the other side of this. But for anybody who's a fan of, having unlockable skill rewards, we have those in Herblore with all the combination potions and more that feed into this whole overload flowchart that I got up on the screen right now. So because of that, I don't see this as a problem. I'd be interested to hear from anybody out there listening if you do have concerns with this patch note. So,
well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said when it went to 120 and there's actual 120 content, then that does kind of change the game. And on top of that, I just have to ask the question: in a 20-year-old game, when is it okay to move on? At what point is it okay to change something, or can it never ever change? Because I feel like that's where we're at, right? It's either you can either change after 12 years, or you don't ever want anything to change ever.
And that's why for so long this podcast had the unofficial slogan, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good example of that, right? Because even though this is a change...
You're right, it is, thinking about it.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of that. All of this stuff that was meant to be preserved with Overload is still preserved at the top end of the scale because it went to 120.
And adrenaline potions. Those are vital in any high-level PVM.
Yeah.
Adrenaline potions, super adrenaline potions, adrenaline renewals, all of those are locked behind the same levels. So it is literally a quality of life thing, because no one would go to a boss like Araxor, which at this point is probably upper mid or lower high, kind of the entry to high level PVM at this point. No one would go to Araxor as a learner without overloads. You just would not do that.
Yeah.
So at the very least, you need 90 Herblore with a +6 boost in order to go to Araxor. Which, to me that seems fine. I don't think the difference between 90 and 92 is that enormous.
No, it's not. It's not. And I think the tacticality of this behind this Ninja Strike, bringing all this stuff in with right before the double XP weekend, is really smart and really genius. And you know what we always talked about, 10, is the ability for the team, the Jagex team, to build goodwill. I honestly think that this Ninja Strike is one of those golden opportunities. And it seems a little bit odd that they're not shouting out about it a little bit more, because this seems like one of the bigger ones, doesn't it?
It does, and I mean, and the timing is great. I mean, Herblore is a skill that you train on double XP, and if you're not doing the highest of the high end, potions or vulnerability, power burst, whatever the case is, I mean, this is still. Overloads are still a viable option, especially like David said, you're going to need them for a base going forward, or you're going to need them just to have them because that's the level of PVM you're at.
Yeah.
And so I thought the timing of it was excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And with that, I feel like we have laid out the point for doing this, and I've tried to lay out the point of why people might not want this. But if you guys have anything to add on this, please do let us know, because this is the kind of thing that we like talking about, something that doesn't necessarily seem controversial to the vast majority of the community, but it's one of those things that people can get really passionate about. So let us know. You can find full episodes of RSBANDB Update right here on this YouTube channel. If you found this video useful or just enjoyed it, like and subscribe, or leave a comment.